Hello and welcome back. We are counting down the 100 scariest wrestlers of all time, and we're almost halfway through. Let's catch you up to speed. Insert reminder to like and subscribe right here. Number 60, Hakushi, real name Kensuke Shinzaki, was born in 1966 but began his professional wrestling career in 1992. He debuted in a promotion called Universal Lucha Libre, and from there went to Michinoku Pro for a couple years before coming to the WWF as Hakushi. The imposed tattoos over the body were a part of the aura, as well as being a silent warrior. At the time where WWE had a lot of goofy type of scary gimmicks, this one was actually not really meant to be scary or goofy, but ended up being one of the scariest, if that makes sense. Number 59, Waylon Mercy. Daniel Eugene Spivey was born in 1952 and debuted in the world of wrestling in 1983. He was a Florida guy and he toiled around with Jim Crockett Promotions as well. That was early on. He ended up in the WWF by 1985 and did about a 3-year run there. After that, he pretty much split his time between Japan and wrestling in NWA/WCW. In 1995, WWE brought him back as Waylon Mercy, which famously enough was a gimmick that was based off of Robert De Niro's character in Cape Fear. Was a personal project for Vince McMahon and could have been something really huge. Didn't really get off the ground though due to Spivey's injuries, and he would pretty much retire shortly into this run. These promos that he cut though, ahead of their time, and of course a huge influence on what would become the Bray Wyatt promos years later. Number 58, the Road Warriors, the second tag team we see inducted on the list here. They started in Georgia Championship Wrestling in 1983, gave the team some time to develop. One of the most legendary tag teams, not really someone we need to do a whole lot of explaining about. I'm going to use this time to just justify the fact that the Road Warriors belong in this list because they were absolutely scary. Just ask any of their opponents from the 80s that were lined up against them in the ring, looking straight out of a Mad Max film with the shoulder pads and the spikes and the face paint, not to mention what they would do to guys in the ring. Number 57, the Sinister Minister. James Mitchell, and that's actually his real name, was born in 1965. First started appearing in wrestling in the Carolinas in about 1989. And I know what you're thinking, this is actually the first non-wrestler manager on the list. Be that as it may, he was first acclimated on a national scale in WCW in about 1996 when they brought him in as the manager of Mortis. There he was known as James Vandenberg. After that run ended, he ended up in ECW as Father James Mitchell, aka the Sinister Minister. That gimmick has stuck with him to present day, and he's used it in virtually every company since then. Everything from TNA to Impact, AEW, the NWA, and so on. Number 56, Umaga. Edward Fatu was born in 1973 and first debuted in wrestling in 1995. During this time, he was known as Eddie Fatu and Ekimo, and then later Ekimo Fatu. You probably first got to know him though as Jamal in the 3-Minute Warning tag team on WWE back in 2002. That lasted a couple years, and then he was expelled out onto the indie scene and did a lot of work in Japan for a couple years. He returned to WWE though in 2006 as Umaga, a new, more even intimidating character with the facial tattoos, was booked as a monster and had an undefeated streak and a long main event run with John Cena. It's kind of the same thing like the Road Warriors, just stand across the ring from the guy. Sadly, we lost him in 2009 at the age of 36. Number 55, Matanza Cueto. Jeff Cobb was born in 1982, started wrestling in 2009, worked the indies for a total of 5 years before getting noticed by Lucha Underground, and that's where they brought him in here as Matanza Cueto, who was basically the big supervillain boss of the show, big menacing guy under a mask, and he dominated pretty much everyone and didn't speak a word while doing it. The strong but silent type, you know what I mean? You can still make the case for him even today as just regular old Jeff Cobb as being one of the most intimidating presences in professional wrestling since Lucha Underground closed down, but a main staple of the American indie scene as well as a big deal in Japan, also been used extensively by Ring of Honor and All Elite Wrestling. Probably one of the most high-profile technical free agents there is out there today. And scary. Number 54, Sid. Sid Vicious was born in 1960 and first started wrestling in 1987. Started out in Continental Championship Wrestling and also did some Japan stuff. As a member of the Skyscrapers in 1989, even had a brief stint in the Four Horsemen, was one of the biggest monsters you could find in the business at the time. So much so that in 1991, Vince McMahon ponied up the big bucks to bring him up north. Sid was the kind of guy that just when you think you had seen it all, just when you thought he was the most scariest, he would one-up himself. And that's what he did with the WWE run, but he bounced around quite a bit. WCW to USWA, back up to WWE, then back to WCW, whether it was Sid Vicious, Sid Justice, Psycho Sid, or just Sid, he created so many either scary or memorable moments for us in one way or another. Plus, we had real life stories about the guy attacking people with scissors and stuff like that, and squeegees. Number 53, Kazar. Nicholas Javekovich, don't know if I said that right, sorry, was born in 1973 and debuted in wrestling in the year 2000. Cut his teeth on the indies for 6 years. However, he did have some sporadic appearances for TNA Wrestling during that time. In 2006, he was finally given the call to come to the WWE and given a character named Kazar. He actually signed his development contract with WWE in 2007. He was brought to FCW as Sin Bodhi, and then they thought up the Kazar character for him to come up to the main roster. It was something that was very rushed for whatever reason, and then it was here and gone. We got a bunch of creepy vignettes, which were probably the scariest part of it all. We got a debut, a few matches, a cup of coffee, and he was out of the WWE. He now roams the indies again as Sin Bodhi and still active to this day. Number 52, Evil. Takaki Watanabe. I probably didn't say that one right either. He was born in 1987, started wrestling in the year 2011. I'm not going to pretend like I know a whole lot about Japanese wrestling, but I just know that this dude Evil is a bad dude. Mostly a New Japan wrestler, but has made sporadic appearances in America over the years. Years ago with Ring of Honor and more currently with AEW. Known as the King of Darkness, what more can you say? The guy's name is Evil. Number 51, Crazy Steve. Real name Steven Scott, and born in 1984. He began wrestling in 2003. This guy worked for a whole 11 years on the independent circuit before finally getting a chance with Impact Wrestling. In 2014, he debuted as part of the Menagerie stable, and from there transitioned into probably his most famous work with a stable called DK, which also included Abyss and Rosemary, and was one of the most over acts in the company at that time. In 2017, Crazy Steve ended up parting ways with Impact Wrestling for whatever whatever reason. Shortly after that, it was found out that he was dabbling with WWE tryouts and so forth. That didn't quite work out, so then he went back to the indies for a while, but actually found his way back to Impact Wrestling in 2020. I mean, just take a look at this guy. He definitely wasn't like the other kids either. Folks, we are halfway through this thing. I can see that light. I can see that glorious light at the end of the tunnel. Please, please, please join us. That way you can see the rest of the countdown as it unfolds live right here on Pro Wrestling Planet. You subscribe to the channel, you get notifications, and then magically one day you're just looking at your phone and it'll just appear like a beacon of hope, like a dove floating through the sky after the world was flooded, and it'll say Pro Wrestling Planet has uploaded a new video. That's what you want. So please make sure you're subscribed and hitting the bell and all that. Also, leave a like on your way out. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you next time right here on Pro Wrestling Planet.